Sayoc Kali. Kali is a very popular martial art, and within it are several tribes, and Sayoc Kali is probably the deadliest tribe of them all. These guys are ruthless, known as headhunters, because if you travel back in time, they actually used to take people's heads off. Today, they are used by Tier 1 organizations to teach operators and operatives alike how to use their blade in the deadliest of ways. This is a very rare moment. These guys do not do interviews. They do not put themselves out there. They are more of a word-of-mouth martial art. So please strap in, go ahead and sheath or unsheath your knives, and get ready for a great series with Harley Elmore, one of the leaders within the Sayoc tribe.
All right, so first and foremost, I want to say thanks for taking the time out, hosting me, allowing us, I mean, it is an honor, a privilege to come here and hang out with you and take a day and learn some skills, get some reps, and play with some tools. All of these key words that we've all learned from you and your tribe and guys that have come to the command and other agencies. I mean, most people don't know where a lot of guys learned what they now currently teach and train and have made part of their lifestyle, really. It's truly an honor to be here and be able to highlight what you have provided over the past 25 years to communities like mine. So thank you very much.
It's my honor to have you guys here and get to spend time with you guys.
Looking forward to it. So to kick it off, Harley, who's Harley? Tell me about yourself, where you got started in the world of combatives or martial arts, and you know, walk us through your path, your journey, and the highlight reel of it all, and you know, and what got you to where you are today.
That's a long story, but the highlights would be, you know, as a young kid, I grew up in a very violent family, violent neighborhood kind of thing, even though it was rural Arkansas. A lot of violence going on there, a lot of violence in school. Had a knife pulled on me in 4th grade. It was the first time it ever happened, you know. So I realized that there was a need for martial arts.
For your own personal safety.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And to protect, you know, like my mom and other people that were, you know, being victimized at the time. So I knew that there, and of course I'd seen Bruce Lee movies and had realized, because he did very good at explaining, hey, martial arts is for that. And so, but you know, not in rural Arkansas, you know, there's not a lot of options for training.
Now, we're talking banjos.
Yeah, banjos, that's it. Yeah,
You better, like, watch your rear.
Yeah, it's quite literally. So the whole thing was, you know, I grew up at the end of a dirt road, you know, miles from the small town that we grew up in that had 1,000 people. That was the big town.
Yeah.
And I was miles outside that, so way out in the middle of nowhere. You couldn't see anyone's house except my house, my grandmother's house, and mountains. It was amazing for all that stuff, and really was good for me. And I still identify myself as a country boy, and you know, all the things that come with that. But I got into martial arts because a world champion kickboxer was looking for ways to diversify and make some money. And so he came to our little town and started, he was the reigning world champion kickboxer at the time. Yeah, and so, I know, right? But you know, he had fallen on some hard times. Managers had taken money and wives and taken money. And so he was coming to our school and teaching a couple times a week. And but not a lot of forms, as you might imagine. It was a lot of calisthenics and a lot of put on these sweaty 16-ounce boxing gloves and go at it. It was before Muay Thai was in the United States. You know, back in the early 80s, it was Professional Karate Association, PKA. Mm-hmm. And so I trained, and then he left, and one of his best friends was also a PKA instructor, or a world champion. Then I studied with him, and just kind of along the way. So that was my introduction, like real hitting, real hard work. And then I started looking into more self-defense, like where are the throws, where are the elbows, where's the weapons, that kind of thing. So I met a guy named Monty Ashley, got my first black belt under him. In the late 80s, I went from him, I met a guy named Terry Gibson. who was an instructor under Dan Inosanto, of course, who's a legend, and Bruce Lee's protege, and one of the world's most sought-after martial artists in our lifetime. And so Terry Gibson in 1990 gave me a job working at his academy and being an instructor at his academy. And that was my shot at the big league, so to speak. That got me to people like Dan Inosanto and Master Chai Sarasut and Siva Francis Fong and all the legends of the time. In the 90s, 80s, 90s, seminars were a real big deal. These kind of martial arts from Southeast Asia were just really getting introduced to America in mass. And you couldn't find them before that, you know. They were little secretive pockets. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. I still do that. I still train with Dan Inosanto to this day.
Yeah, what an experience that is. And I think, you know, earlier I was telling you, my first experience with JKD and Kali was Danny Inosanto.
Yeah.
And it was a seminar in the early 90s.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
And it was his wife and his daughter, and I was just like, whoa, this
Yeah.
whole family are just badass.
Yeah. So the fact that you telling me his wife and his daughter were there, that tells me when it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. In fact, I can look at people in the Inosanto lineage, and by watching how they do Kali, I can tell when they trained or when their instructor trained with Guru Dan.
Oh, wow.
Because it's been around long enough to see the changes, you know. But,
Yeah.
And then in the late 90s, I was working with Guru Dan, and we were doing some knife work, and I was trying to convince him to do a little bit more knife work in this seminar. Like, can we do some more of that other stuff that we've worked on? Because I picked his brain about a lot of that stuff privately. And he said, you know, Harley, if you really want to study blade work, you need to go study under this guy named Chris Sayoc. And I was like, who's that? Who's that guy?
What's a Sayoc?
Yeah, and so he gave me got his cell phone out, gave me his cell phone number. So I came back home and called him and called Chris Sayoc. I didn't know any better. I was like, yeah, I'm going to try a seminar.
Yeah.
I thought it would be just like any other martial artist I'd ever trained with. I would just go to a few seminars, learn a few things. Called Tuan Sayoc. He immediately hung up with me and called and vetted me with Guru Dan, and then called back and said, okay, when do you want me to come down? And so he came down, and that first event was pretty brutal. I think he was kind of vetting us a little bit himself, like to see who we were and what we were made of. And it ended up being one of the greatest relationships of my lifetime.
Yeah.
So getting to train with him has been an honor to train with him and to represent his art and to continue to represent his art.
Let's break down Kali.
Yeah.
Because we have Sayoc.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tribes, families.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's go through macro.
Yeah.
A good understanding. Okay, how is all that broken down for the layman?
Sure. So if we walk back in time a little bit, we go, okay, well now they're their own country. Before that, America bought them from Spain. Before that, they were owned and occupied by the Spanish for 377 years. Before that, they were part of the Nation of Islam. Before that, they were their own.
We're talking about
tribes.
the Philippines.
The Philippines in general.
Yeah.
That's right. Sorry. So it's a melting pot of a lot of different ethnicities. They are their own individual tribes. Very weapons-based culture. So lots of swords, lots of spears, lots of spear and shield, lots of knife work. And they waged war like in American Indians. The tribes waged war on each other. They don't always speak the same dialect. Can have completely clashing cultures just on one side of the mountain than the other. So very war-based and travel blade-based. And so as that evolved and the Spanish got there, they quelled that to some degree. Most of the Philippines they occupied. And they said if you get caught carrying a sword or having a weapon with you or training any kind of weaponry, you're publicly executed. And so from there the art became more of a stick art. So they practiced stick work. They wore more elaborate costumes. They did it as a form of dance. And that's how they were able to retain the art as a living art. And they practiced it at night under the moonlight. That's why most Kali emblems will have a moon, because they kept the art alive at night when no one could watch them. And then in the late 1800s, they formed a good revolution and were able to fight with the Americans. We went and helped them out, and they won their freedom from Spain. So very, very recent war culture.
it seems each tribe kind of focuses more on one discipline than others.
Yeah.
So Sayoc's very much blade oriented.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are some of the other popular tribes that are not blade? They've got, let's say, stick or sword or...
Yeah, the Doce Pares group out of the Philippines, Balintawak, they're all stick-based. You know, they will say that it could also be sword, but anytime you put your hands on someone's stick or tucking their stick under your armpit, it's not a blade-based system.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of arts that are still very, very stick-oriented. They do full contact stick sparring, and so what that means is now you have to have a lot more power generation. You have to pull back a lot farther because it's an impact weapon now.
Mm-hmm.
Where with an edged weapon, you wouldn't necessarily have to do those things. In fact, doing so would probably be fatal. So, so there is a difference between stick arts. There's a generalization that, yeah, I'm swinging a stick that could also be a sword. But when you really get into the mix, there's some real differences between blade arts versus stick arts. But, you know, just so happens that Sayoc is primarily a blade system.
Yeah, I've always known as blade, and my introduction was with sticks. It's interesting to, you know, listening to you with the history that blade first, sticks were just a way to keep the art alive.
That's right.
So you didn't get in trouble with the blade, and then of course now going back to blade again.
Yep.
So it makes sense that the sticks are somewhat really popular there for a very long time, because really it was just a way of kind of hiding the true art.
That's right. That's right.
The motions, I think one of the coolest things I learned about Kali is whether you're empty hand, blade, or stick, all of the motions are somewhat the same, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You know, Dan Inosanto refers to it as motion grouping. Once you learn this set of motions, the weapons are transferable. The only thing that will change will be subtleties in targeting, right? So if you have an impact weapon like a stick, like a flat stick made of hickory, you would want to hit collarbone, right? Collarbone, top of the shoulder, temple, corner of the temple, things like that. But if you change that to a blade, now you're going to want to go to soft tissue like, you know, carotids, jugulars, you know, deltoid muscles, things like that.
Yeah.
So you have, but the target, the aim, the motion is the same. It's just the targeting changes just slightly.
Yeah, your motion and technique is almost,
same.
yeah, exactly the
right.
same. There might be a little bit of different manipulation in your own joints, right?
Right.
To make it happen. But
yeah, a little bit of targeting change, but as far as how you're going to swing it, move it around, and move it amongst yourself, so you don't self-inflict.
Yeah.
You know, that's a pretty
important.
It's pretty important. You know, it's important with a stick that you don't just chip your elbow every time you swing it, but it's even more important with a sword that you don't cut on the inside of your wrist and things like that. So.
Yeah, and on someone who really understands and uses sticks, what are those sticks clocked at? 100 miles an hour plus, right?
Yeah, the end
Easily.
of the stick. Yeah, the end of the stick is moving a little over 100 miles an hour with a decent practice.
Yeah, I know we did some of the cane work.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize a cane.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a good, solid tactical cane,
Yep.
I mean, not only can you carry them everywhere,
Yes.
on airplanes, no one's allowed to ask you because of HIPAA.
That's right.
And
That's right.
you can get that thing up to about 130, 140, 180 miles an hour just with one wrist movement.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting, because I think people underestimate some of these tools that are out there that are very simple, been around forever,
Yeah.
but have a very solid place in today's environment.
I agree completely. Dan Inosanto's system has 12 categories of weaponry. So I'm not going to go into them all, of course, but
Yeah.
but you know, you have impact weapons, you have edged weapons, you have long, like a staff or a bow, you have flexible weapons, you have thrown weapons, things like that, flails, and so when you study all those, you walk through the world and you look at something and you look at it for its characteristics that mimic one of those weapons categories. So now I'm never unarmed, because I always see that towel is a flexible weapon, right? That is a flail, that is a this, that is a that, this is a shield, that's an impact weapon. And when you start seeing the world that way, it really does make a huge difference. And no one can keep you from that.
Right.
Right? No one can keep you from constantly seeing what's available to you at all times as you're walking through. It's a little bit like the robot, the Terminator, picking up things, you know, identifying that and that and that, you know.
It definitely supports some of the stuff I've had in all my books with improvisation, being adaptable. Hot coffee burns the face, salt and pepper burns the eyes,
Yep.
and it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So you might as well identify it, know it's there. It gives you a certain amount of comfort.
It does.
And you're basically ready for anything.
You are, and we've had friends that have used those things in real world, and so even though I haven't done it, I've taught it for years. But when people come back and go, hey, that coffee thing, we're like, wow, that's great. I'm glad that worked for you, But yeah, it really is very comforting, and it also is a little bit of education because we're not the only people doing this, right?
Yeah.
So bad guys are living life around weaponry and the real application of that stuff all the time too. So if you're not aware of that, then you can fall victim to those just like anybody else. So.
Yeah, I think you'd agree. Technology has really made us all dumber, and and made us feel it's a false sense of security these days. And a lot of people just need, hey, it's really not complicated, but people have forgotten simple.
Yes.
That a steel barrel pen will take your eyeball out, no different than one of your custom knives.
Nope, it works just as well.
Yeah, and it's just knowing that there's these resources available around us at all times, and even if you can't afford certain things, you can definitely find something to substitute that'll do just as good a job most of the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Well, I tell people all the time. You know how many people are killed with a paring knife every year? A lot more than killed with some fancy custom fighting knife, right?
Yeah.
Or some sort of third world grape cutter or something like that. Some little
It's got enough of a curve on it that
Right.
makes it evil.
Yeah. That's third world karambit. There's all those little sickles all over the world, and those guys use those every day, all day long. Carry them with them. They're razor sharp. It's like their thumb. They're so comfortable with it. And you gonna walk into their culture and be ignorant of those facts? That's
crazy.
silly. Yeah.
So. When you provide yourself options, then you're giving yourself time, and time ultimately is going to allow you to win or survive. And you just nailed it, right? 3 pairs of scissors. Most people at the beginning of that statement are like, wait a minute, why? One's a projectile, and then the other 2 for each hand.
Yeah.
And right then, now everyone adapts that concept. You've just given yourself a whole lot of time, right? Just by having 3 pairs of scissors instead of 1.
That's right.
And it goes back, like I'm doing crisis management for a lot of big companies, and one of the tests I will always do, and it's just to show how much of an advantage you actually do have, even though the bad guy has a gun and you may not. And I just give them racquetballs. And when I come through the door, everyone's throwing a racquetball at me.
Right.
Do you really think, and some of those guys can wing a racquetball
Sure.
hard enough to hurt, right?
Yeah.
But it's enough coming at the bad guy or me to where I really can't get anything done.
Right.
But it's creating time.
Right.
And then now everybody in that room, by the time I can actually go, okay, who am I shooting first? They're already out the exits.
Right.
Just by throwing 20 racquetballs at me.
Yep.
At the same time. It works, and it's time. How do I get time on my side? And that's what people really need to think about. So, tools provide time.
Yeah,
Time,
that's
options equals survivability.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's how I approach improvised weapons. Is how much time do I have?
Yeah.
Right. I hear something. I look outside my hotel window and I see people get out of the car. I'm like, oh, I got 30 seconds. So now I've got 30 seconds to improvise a weapon and be getting some work done. Somebody calls me and says they're on their way. Well, now I have, 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So how much better is that weapon platform at 15 minutes rather than 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody says, sends me an email, hey, I'm coming to kill you. We're like, well, now I have 3 months or 3 weeks. Well, I'll have fabricated something amazing by then.
Yeah.
A team with real weapons is what I'll have fabricated. But so really improvisation of weaponry boils down to how much time do I have, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Back to Sayoc. The tribe, the family. When did it kind of get, you and I talked about this. This is not the kind of stuff that would be on social media or YouTube or being taught across the country to law-abiding citizens. It just wouldn't.
No.
This used to be like, the Sayoc guys are coming to the command.
Right.
And you didn't really, you kept that.
Right, we did.
And you didn't, I remember, you don't even tell your other buddies at the regular SEAL teams. And we got, this is special.
Right.
This is just for us. This is a tier 1 thing.
It certainly was, yeah.
This is high level training that you're so proud of that you want to keep it secret and you don't want anybody else to get to know about it.
Right.
So what is that? How does that feel now for you where it's like, you got a lot of guys that learned this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they go out and now they're doing their own training programs and they're spreading the word in a great way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But where does that leave Sayoc tribe?
Sure. Well, first off, as we talked about earlier, what a amazing time in my career.
Yeah.
To be honored to be on those first contracts, to be there at the first handshakes and the formulation of curriculum and see the need of the mission and how we were going to fill those and build all those training paradigms and just amazing, right? Just amazing. And I didn't realize it at the time because I had my nose to the grindstone. I knew this was special. I didn't quite realize how special. I knew the people that I was with on both sides. On my team, I realized how special my guys were on my team, and I realized how special the people we were working with were. And I got to say, Tom Kyer did a phenomenal job of realizing where those two cultures came together. Mm-hmm. It was really, the silent professional. Those guys didn't go talk about what they did, who they were, or what they did, and we went, check.
Yeah.
And so we didn't. We didn't go talk. I mean, this is really the first time me personally, am actually getting out and talking about it, or even demonstrating some of the material that has been around. We've been teaching for 20 years,
Yeah.
And that is because the world's changed, right? Like you said, a lot of those guys retired, went on, and now are teaching and spreading the great training that we gave them, and they're doing a great job of it. But a lot of that stuff is now more socially acceptable, and there's a market for it and a need for it. So now, we're kind of telling our story for the first time ourselves in Sayoc, and I'm honored to do that.
Yeah. So I mean, Sayoc, I kind of compare it to, as a kid, when I did a little bit of the Taekwondo, thinking it would be like a ninja and being let down.
Yeah.
Then going and doing a little bit of ninjutsu and going, this isn't exactly what I thought it was going to be either.
Yeah.
It's almost the same as like when you're doing SEAL stuff, the basic kind of SEAL stuff.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, well, wait a minute, I thought there was going to be something more. And then more came once you get to like a tier 1 command. Right. Now you're like, oh, this is the stuff that I had been dreaming of, right? Yeah. And the same thing applies to combatives.
Yeah.
We would go through all of these different combative packages, and it evolved in the SEAL community. I remember one of Danny and Santo's prize guys, Paul Vunak. You remember that guy?
I sure do. Yeah, he's still active.
No, he's a dangerous guy.
Very, very dangerous martial artist. Very good. Grew up in the Inosanto Academy. Had the best trainers in the world, and so martially, I mean,
badass.
Knows his stuff, and was in the '80s. He was cream of the crop, man. He really was.
But that was the intro to the command reaching out, realizing, we need to go further.
Yeah.
And we need to really get involved or look at what the full spectrum of everything. And those were the days of Marchenko and Danny Chalker. And I mean, you're talking the plank owners of the command that brought him in. And to think, and you fast forward to today, even today, now you reaching out and getting those outside experts to come in and really show how it's done with information, knowledge, and experience that is lethal and relatable to the mission,
Yep.
you know, that's key. Because I think we went through a lot of phases where you got a lot of stuff that we did that, yeah, it kind of works, you know, and it was always like, well, if you got your gear on, you've got this gun and you got this, then you're only going to be able to do this blast.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
we went through the blast period. Remember those
Yeah.
days?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then it, you know, finally you realize, wait a minute, no, I boarded a ship that we got to the bridge, and it was like this Russian guy. And he did, you're like, get on the fucking ground, motherfucker. And you got your little ninja hood on,
Right,
you
yeah,
got
yeah.
body armor, you look all intimidating. And he was like, no. Okay. You're
the
slinging
first-
your weapon.
you're the
and
first
like,
ninja he's seen.
This isn't gonna work, right? Now I gotta fight this guy, like fight. And it was a brawl on a bridge of a boat in the middle of the night, right? And it's like, I need to know more. You know, this wasn't gonna work.
This is not happening,
You know?
yeah, yeah.
And though at the time, you know, that seemed great.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you put the hood on, you're standing in this box on the ground.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I mean, it works until it doesn't work.
Yep.
And then you realize, wait, it's not that was wrong, it's just you realize you need more tools.
Yep, that's right.
We're going to go ahead and take a break here. In the next episode, we're going to be talking anatomy and physiology and why it's so important to know all the different parts and pieces of the body, especially when you're working with a blade. If you want to be the most effective person with a blade, then you've got to know the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, where all the major arteries are, and how to attack them. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.